Georgia, you could you repeat that question again to kind of refresh? Um, could you repeat the question about? I think you said something about if you touch blood, how long are you unclean? There are different bloods. There are blood from animals, blood from animals. There are bloods when you get injured. There are blood from when you are on your period. There are different kinds of blood. So your question was, when you touch blood, how long are you unclean? So could you clarify the question? I want to know like which blood you're talking about. Are you talking about the blood when someone is in their period, or are you talking about the blood? Which blood are you referring to?
Yes, I'm sorry for the noise. I'm riding in the car right now. But yeah, I was dealing with my son and I touched his blood. I was, on his face. And so that's the blood I'm talking about, human blood.
Oh, okay. Well, when it comes to human blood, um, when it comes to clean and unclean, the blood that the Bible speaks of is the flower, as you will remember from Leviticus chapter 15. That's the blood that the Bible does talk about, that is unclean. The blood that comes out from somebody is not necessarily, we shouldn't be touching it just for, and anyhow, but that doesn't really, it's not the same as a blood that comes out from someone when they are in their period. It's different. The blood that comes out when someone is in their period is way, way, way different from the blood that you may that may come out from an animal or from um, or from a human being. Like the Most High told us not to eat blood. We're supposed to pour blood into dig the ground and pour in the blood. So when we kill a goat or a sheep or a ram or any animal that we can eat, typically they do have blood. Touching the blood doesn't make you unclean. Touching the dead animal itself that you killed doesn't make you unclean. If they die by themselves, that makes you unclean. But the blood, we're told not to eat the blood, but to pour it on the ground. So same thing, if somebody gets injured and blood comes out from them, it doesn't really that doesn't really make you unclean, as in the same way that the blood that comes out from a woman will make you unclean. When a blood that comes out from a woman who is in her period, if that blood touches a man, uh, if that blood touches a man, then that man is unclean for 7 days. Just like the woman herself, the man is unclean for 7 days. So the woman who is also seeing the period, seeing her flower, is also unclean for 7 days. So if you are in your period, let's say whenever you're in your period, you are unclean for 7 days. Now your period, the flower or the blood may stop coming after 3 days. They may stop coming out after 4 days. They may stop coming out. It doesn't matter. You have to be unclean for 7 days, according to Leviticus chapter 15. I will recommend that you read Leviticus chapter 15, because if you read Leviticus chapter 15, you're going to see a very, very detailed information as to how this applies to men and women. Today, when we talk about clean and unclean, we're typically talking about not eating pork and women being in their period. Actually, I hear more of food being talked about. I don't hear a lot of people talking about how women being in their, it's not being talked about a lot, and we have to be mindful of this. Like as I always say, being unclean does not make you, you're not committing sin by being unclean. Like, being unclean is not a sin. It's what happens after you become unclean. So let's say you become unclean. Let's say you become unclean and you don't do anything. You become unclean and you don't do what you need to do. If you become unclean, let's say you touch it. I'm going to try to be specific. I'm going to try to be specific to every single one of this, including what you asked in your question. According to Leviticus chapter 15, and Numbers chapter 19, you need to read these two places. If you want to find out more about clean and unclean, you need to read Leviticus chapter 15 and Numbers chapter 19. So, if you touch a dead body, you are unclean for 7 days. If you touch a dead body, you are unclean for 7 days. When you are unclean, according to Leviticus chapter 12, verse 4, Leviticus chapter 12, when you are unclean, you're not supposed to touch anything that is holy, like the scriptures, like the Bible. In Leviticus chapter 12, our Heavenly Father says that, for example, when a woman is in her period, when a woman is unclean after she gives birth to a child, after she gives birth, in Leviticus chapter 12, it says in verse 4, she shall then continue. I'm going to actually read this one. So Yah says in Leviticus chapter 12, then Yah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman has conceived and bore a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her customary impurity shall she be unclean. As in the days of her customary impurity. That's your monthly period. So whenever you are unclean, you're in your period, from the first day you saw that blood come out, you're going to be unclean for 7 days. So it says in verse 4, verse 3, and of course talking about circumcision. Verse 3, and on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, meaning the child that you give birth to. Verse 4, she shall then continue in the blood of her purification. 33 days she shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary, until the days of her purification are fulfilled. So when you are unclean, we're not to touch anything holy, and we call the Bible Holy Bible. The Bible is holy. Try not to go into the congregation of Yah. You are not to join us on the Sabbath. You can join us on a day like this, but the Sabbath is a holy day. The Sabbath is a holy day. We are not to pray or approach the Most High when we are unclean. You can see this in Exodus chapter 19. Exodus 19. So according to the book of Exodus chapter 19, when the Most High wanted to meet the Israelites, Exodus chapter 19, when the Most High wanted to meet the Israelites, he told Moses to tell them to prepare themselves, because he will meet them on the 3rd day. The men was told not to have sex with their wives, because having sex makes you unclean until evening, according to Leviticus chapter 15, and also Jubilees chapter 50. Jubilees chapter 50, even on the Sabbath, we are not to do that on the Sabbath. We are not to have sex on the Sabbath, because it makes you unclean. So a lot of this information you're going to see in Leviticus chapter 15. I really highly recommend that you read Leviticus chapter 15. You're going to see a lot of information about clean and unclean as it pertains to men and women. And also sperm. When a sperm comes out from a man, he is unclean until evening. He is unclean until evening. That's the reason why when a husband and wife has sex, they are unclean until evening. Now, so what I'm going to try to do right now is let's kind of break it down a little bit. There are 2 types of uncleanliness. There are 2 types of uncleanliness. You have the first grade, the major part of being unclean. Or if you want to call it, I'm going to categorize it in 2 ways. The category A is when you are unclean for 7 days. There are things that can make you unclean to be unclean for. There are things that can make you unclean for 7 days. This can happen to women, and this can happen to men. So when you are on your period, you are unclean for 7 days. Now, if your period began today, and 2 days later it stops, it doesn't matter. You're still unclean for 7 days. I'm not going to go into too much details as to the reason why the Most High made it this way, but part of the reason why he made it this way is because if you are unclean, if you're on your period, most of the time that blood will stop coming after 3 days, after 4 days, 5 days. But it varies depending on the woman. It varies from woman to woman. So, but if it's left for us to decide that, okay, I'm no longer seeing the blood, so I'm clean, you may wake up tomorrow morning and still see blood. So that's why he put that period of time, 7 days. That's how long you're going to be unclean, for 7 days. Again, please read Leviticus chapter 15, the whole chapter of Leviticus chapter 15, the whole chapter. So when you're on your period, you're unclean for 7 days. Any man that has sex with a woman who is in a period, that man is automatically also unclean for 7 days. If you have sex with a woman who is in a period, you are unclean for 7 days. Now, if you touch anything like a bed or a chair, anything, when somebody is unclean, anything that they touch becomes unclean. Anywhere they sit becomes unclean. When a woman is in her period, let me make sure I say that right. When a woman is on her period, anything that she touches becomes unclean. If you touch that thing, you are not going to be unclean for 7 days. You will only be unclean until evening. The Most High is testing us. These are very simple instructions. Very simple. But oftentimes we tend to ignore the simple instructions, and it gets us in trouble. Lot, his wife, keep walking, do not look back. What's so hard about that? Do not look back. She did, and you saw the result. So it's a very simple instruction. So when a woman is on her period, first of all, if you are a woman and you're on your period, you are unclean for 7 days. And at the end of the 7th day, you're unclean. Basically what you do is you don't touch anything that is holy. You don't pray to the Most High because you are unclean. Spiritually, to him, you are unclean. Now, you may wear the best clothing in the world and smell good and look good, but spiritually, in the sight of Yah, you are unclean. Not being able to follow this simple instruction will cost you your salvation and will leave you to be punished and destroyed along with the Gentiles. It's a simple instruction. If you happen to be in a house where there are women and they happen to be on their period, then you're simply unclean until evening. So if I live in the house with a woman that is on her period, then what I do, because if I get to touch the bed or the chair or the cup that she touches, that makes me unclean also until evening. She's unclean for 7 days. I'm unclean only until evening. So what I need to do is that I need to, in the evening before the sun goes down, I need to go and shower. Take a bath on a running water, like a shower. Open up a shower and you take shower. That's what you do, and you change your clothes. And if you're still in the same house with her, you're still unclean, and then you do the same thing tomorrow evening. Then tomorrow evening, then the day after that, then the day after that, until she's clean. Then you are also clean. When you live in the same house, you cannot avoid this. It's bound to happen. It's bound to happen, and Yah knows that it was going to happen. And Yah said something in Leviticus chapter 15. There was something that the Most High said there, because he knows that there will be men that will live in the house with women who are unclean. He knows that this was going to happen, and he tells you what to do when that happens. So it says in Leviticus chapter 15, Leviticus chapter 15 from verse 19. If a woman has a discharge, and the discharge from her body is blood, she shall be set apart 7 days. Whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. It's that simple. Verse 21 or verse 20, everything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean. Also, everything that she sits on shall be unclean. Verse 21, whoever touches her bed shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and be unclean until evening. That's simple. So if you touch anything that she touches, like as I said, you simply, or like the Bible says, what you do is you go into shower, take off your clothes and just take it out and just wash yourself. I'm telling you this like the easy way. The easy way to do it is to go into shower, take off your clothes, put them on the floor, just wash yourself, wash the clothes real quick, put on a new clothes. You're not going to do this for the rest of your life. You do this for only 7 days. If you live in a house with a woman who is on her period, maybe your daughter, maybe your wife, it depends. So it's a simple instruction. It's not that difficult. When we studied this in the past, I try to tell you how to do this in a fun way. How to do this in a fun way. How to make it to be, you're going to shower anyways. You're going to take a bath anyway. Why not just reserve that shower for the evening? Reserve it for only in the evening for those periods. So if you do it and do it right, it will not be a problem. But it can become a burden depending on how you look at it, how you do it. So a woman being on her period, she's unclean for 7 days. If you are a man and you touch anything that she touches on, if you're a man and you touch anything that she touched, that makes you unclean until evening. Now, it says in verse 27, look at verse 27, because Yah knew that men are going to have wives and they eventually, at some point, their wife is going to be on their period. So Yah said this, whoever touches those things shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes and bathe in water until evening. So, again, read Leviticus chapter 15 yourself. Spend some time and read the whole chapter. So, being on your period makes you unclean. Touching that makes you unclean. According to Numbers chapter 19, touching a bone of somebody who is dead, a human bone, like bone of a dead body, touching that makes you unclean for 7 days. Touching a grave, somebody's grave, a dead person's grave, makes you unclean for 7 days. Touching a dead animal, an animal that died by itself, makes you unclean for 7 days. If you kill the animal yourself, it doesn't make you unclean. You can eat it. But if an animal dies by itself, touching that makes you unclean. only until evening. If you touch a dead animal, it makes you unclean only until evening. Like a dead pig, a dead dog, a dead cat, a dead bird. Touching stuff like that makes you unclean until evening. In the evening before the sun goes down, you take shower. Around that time that the sun is going down, you take shower. And that's it. So failure to do those things, failure to acknowledge, if you happen to touch a dead dog or a dead cat or a dead bird, if you failure to wash yourself in the evening, or if somebody is on her period and you touch anything that she touched, that makes you unclean until evening. Not for 1 week, but only until that evening. Failure to take shower on that evening, that's where the sin comes in. That's where you break the law. That's when it becomes a sin. So actually becoming unclean itself is not the problem. It's what happens after you become unclean and what you do. So we're supposed to do not touch anything that is holy. Do not enter into the house of Yah. Do not try to pray or worship during those periods. That's how you acknowledge that you are unclean. Don't pray to the Most High. Do not touch the scriptures. Can you listen to the scripture? Fine. So those period of time that you are unclean, that's where we who are living right now have an advantage over the people that lived in the past. Because there are some apps that you can download on your phone and you can listen to the scripture if you want to. But you can't touch it. You can't pray to the Most High. You are unclean. He is holy. You are unclean during that period. There are some laws that the Most High gave us that are 100% for our own good. There are sometimes the Most High will test us to see to test us. So if you ignore this, then you fail the test. And like you read in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 and 18. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 and 18 says, "Come out from among them and be ye separate. Touch nothing unclean, and I will receive you to myself. I will be a father to you, and you will be sons and daughters to me." In the book of Revelation, it says that no one that practices uncleanness, nothing unclean, will be allowed into the kingdom of heaven. So this is the time to begin to acknowledge those clean and unclean. Any fish that does not have fins and scales is unclean. Any fish without fins and scales. So any fish that does not have like when you see at the tail of a fish, it has that fins. At the end of a fish, on the tail, has a fin like this, and also you can take out the scales. Any fish or anything in the ocean, when you come to the ocean, all the creatures in the ocean, all the creatures in the ocean, any creature that does not, you cannot take out the scales on the skin, is unclean. If you can take out the scales with a knife and it has a fin at the end of the tail, you can eat that fish. It's good. So shrimp, oyster, shark, lobster, all of these other things are unclean from the ocean. So if you want to see what it looks like, you can go to Google and type in fish with fins and scales. You may be able to see a picture that will show you what it looks like. A lot of the time today, people are talking about pork and shrimp as unclean food. They don't mention that all the fishes are unclean except the ones that have fins on their tail and you can take out the scales. Those are the clean ones. You can't eat them, you can't touch them when they die by themselves. So acknowledging clean and unclean is very important. My advice is for everyone is to read Leviticus chapter 15. Read Leviticus chapter 15 and Numbers chapter 19. If you remember the woman with the blood, flow of blood. If you remember the woman that has the issue of blood for a long time, after Yeshua healed her, after she touched Yeshua's tassels, she was healed. Yeshua told her to go and see the high priest, to go and see the priest, so that she can go and take the things that she needs to take over there, and the priest will do the sacrifices that needs to be done. So Yeshua was the one that told her to go do this. Read Luke chapter 8. So she went and she did what Yeshua told her. So that's where the priest comes in. Normally we're supposed to go to the priest and they will do the sacrifices and do the things that they need to do. But the temple is currently destroyed. The priestly system is suspended. The priestly system is currently suspended right now. The Israelite has been kicked out of their land. The Hebrews are no longer in their land. The Hebrews are kicked out of their land right now. They are not in their land, and the temple was destroyed. The priests have been scattered in the four corners of the earth. So you can't go to the priests right now. But according to Malachi chapter 2, Malachi chapter 2 shows us that when Yeshua comes back, according to Malachi chapter 2, he is going to refine the priesthood. According to Malachi chapter 2, they will go back and continue doing their work that they used to do. So now what we need to do is that we need to acknowledge when we are unclean. We need to acknowledge that and do what we need to do. Don't touch anything that is holy. Do not try to pray to the Most High. He knows what's in your heart. He knows what you need. Acknowledge that you are unclean. If you have kids around when you are in your period, make sure that they take shower every evening before the sun goes down and wash their clothes also. This is very simple. Don't make it complicated. Keep it simple. Like as I said, go into the bathroom, take off your clothes, put it down, shower, and then take your clothes and put some soap and just wash it real quick. You don't have blood stain on the clothes. You don't have dirt and a really, really, really bad stain on the clothes. So you don't have to stand there and wash it for 10 hours. You don't need to do that. Put it down on the water and put some soap and just wash it real quick. You don't need to wash it for 5 minutes. You don't need to do that. Just wash it real quick, put it aside, dry it, put on a new clothes. Make it simple. But if you want to take off the clothes and put it aside and wait, you're making it complicated. If I'm unclean and I touched a woman who is on her period, I typically approach the bathroom with my clothes, with what I wear. I will take it out, put it down on the the bath, on the floor, whatever. Put it down, and then shower, and then wash it with me. So as I'm coming out of the bathroom, I've washed myself. I also wash those clothes. Then I put on a new clothes. So in that way, you don't have to wash it later because you have to wash it immediately. It's easy that way. Very simple. I don't stand there and wash it for like 10 minutes or 20 minutes because the cloth is simply spiritually unclean. So this is a very simple instruction that Yah gave us. Unfortunately, most people are not going to be able to keep this instruction. They will think it's a joke. They will not take this seriously. I really hope and pray and wish that you will take this seriously. Again, Leviticus chapter 15, Numbers chapter 19. These are places, and also Leviticus chapter 12, and also Leviticus chapter 14, Leviticus chapter 13. So I would really say if you want to learn about clean and unclean, you want to start reading from Leviticus chapter 11 actually. Leviticus chapter 11 deals with about food. Yes. So you want to start from Leviticus chapter 11. It deals with about clean and unclean food. There's a little bit more in Deuteronomy chapter 14. Deuteronomy chapter 14 deals a little bit more But Leviticus chapter 11, you start from there. So you can learn about clean and unclean food. There you will see what I said about fish and things like that. Turkey is also unclean. Turkey is unclean because it's after vulture. It's of the same family as a vulture. So turkey, that bird, the turkey meat, it's unclean because it falls into the category of a vulture. Chicken is fine. We have spent time studying this over here, and we went deep looking at all the pictures of those animals you see in Leviticus chapter 11. We did that. Hopefully I'll be able to turn that into a video one day so you can see those animals yourself. I could do that, but we're going to have to do it on Google, and I'll be, I'll try to figure something out because it looks different when you see the pictures of those animals. And then you can see how turkey is an unclean bird because it's of the same family as a vulture. Chicken is fine. Because there's no bird in Leviticus chapter 11 that chicken falls into the family of. So my advice would be to start with Leviticus chapter 11 and learn about clean and unclean food. Start with and then go over to chapter 12, Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12, you read that a little bit from the beginning. And then you go over to Leviticus chapter 13, chapter 14. You read about leprosy and all that, people having a leprosy and the way it's supposed to be done. And then you want to focus on Leviticus chapter 15. That's where you will see so much information about clean and unclean. And then also Numbers chapter 19. These are places that I will advise for you to look. But please try to acknowledge when you are unclean. Like it says in the book of Revelation, those that do practice uncleanliness, if you are unclean and you don't care, you're on your period and you don't care, you touch a dead animal and you don't care, you eat whatever you want, you will not be allowed into the kingdom of heaven. You will not be allowed into the kingdom of heaven because you're practicing uncleanliness. When you are unclean and you don't acknowledge it, you are practicing uncleanliness. And the book of Revelation tells you that nobody that practices uncleanliness will be allowed into the kingdom. There's a lot of things that the Bible says that will happen, that has happened. That's how we know that the things we read in Revelation will happen also. You have to acknowledge when you are unclean. You have to acknowledge it and do the things that you need to do. So in that way, you are not practicing uncleanliness. And like as I always say, if you have any question about any of this, please feel free to contact me. I don't mind. I will spend any time on the phone with you until you understand whatever. I will not respond really to any question on text messages or emails, but you can still email me or text message me. But when it comes to, you're more than welcome to call me. This is very important, and our salvation also depends on this. That's the reason why it was mentioned in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 and verse 18. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. I hope that this will help someone or help you to really begin to acknowledge when you are unclean. And most importantly, you have to teach this to your children, to your sons and to your daughters. If she's not already seeing her period, eventually she will start seeing her period. He needs to know about this, your son too, and your daughters. It doesn't matter how old your daughter is, you need to teach your daughter about this. Because according to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 46, Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 46, the law commands you to teach your children about the laws. Our Heavenly Father commands you, according to His law, that you must teach your children the laws in the scriptures. You have to teach them. That's why this is very important. You have to teach your children also about clean and unclean. Sit them down. Maybe on the Sabbath. open the Bible, have them first of all read Leviticus chapter 15, and then you go through it with them so that they can know. And you have to constantly remind them the importance of doing this, so that you will know that you've done your part, you've done your job as a parent. Also in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and chapter 11, you're supposed to teach your children the law. So this is, what we need to know about clean and unclean. We have to do and observe and make sure that we don't practice uncleanliness. We're not taught this in the Christian church. We were not taught this in the Christian church. In the Christian church, we have been taught to not take this thing seriously, because we're told that we are no longer under the law, which is a lie. So we have to be careful that we observe these things. We don't take it for granted. And like as I said, if you do have any question, first of all, read Leviticus chapter 11. Leviticus chapter 11, chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15. And Numbers chapter 19. And if you have any question, or if you're wondering whatever, you're more than welcome to contact me about clean and unclean. So all praises to our Heavenly Father. I pray and hope that Yah will give you strength, and I pray that you will have the spirit to really take this thing seriously. So touching a human blood does not necessarily make you unclean. A human blood like that doesn't really make you unclean like that, as touching the blood that comes out from a woman when she's in her period. That makes you unclean for 7 days if that blood touches you. That's why she's also unclean for 7 days. So all praises to Yah for everything, and for this information. I pray that you will take this seriously and acknowledge when you are unclean, and also teach it to others, your daughters, your sons, and even to outsiders whenever you can. You can teach it by passing along this video. You don't have to tell them anything. You can just pass it along to them to watch and tell you what they think. So all praises to Yah. That's the question that the sister asked, and that's the answer. We have to acknowledge this. We have to acknowledge when we are unclean. The Christians don't do this, and Revelation makes it clear that those that practice uncleanness will not be allowed into the kingdom. Those that practices uncleanness will never be allowed into the kingdom, according to the book of Revelation. So that's how we know that this is very serious. Yah also tells us to come out from among them and be separate, and touch nothing unclean. It's a very serious situation that you have to take into account yourself, and also make sure that you teach it to your children and to any young person that you know, however you can. And these days it's easy to teach, to pass this. You don't have to say anything. You can simply pass along this information, this video, or you can simply ask them to read Leviticus 15 and tell you what they think. So in that way you can bring their attention to it. You can sit your children down and have them read it and tell you what they think. But you need to let them know, they need to understand that the Most High will punish those who don't acknowledge clean and unclean. He will punish them. This is a very, very serious situation. Nothing unclean will be allowed into the kingdom of heaven. So all praises to Yah for everything. I hope that this was helpful for the sister that asked the question about clean and unclean. The blood that you want to watch out for is the blood that comes out when somebody is in their period. If somebody gets injured and that blood touches you, that doesn't necessarily, that's not the blood that you want to worry about, because we're not supposed to also eat blood. People eat blood today. People do cook blood and they eat blood. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to eat blood of any kind. We're not supposed to eat blood of any kind at all. So all praises to Yah for everything. Like as I said, read those places and you're more than welcome to contact me if you have any question more about this.